Hello.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, everybody. My name is Carl.
I'm Taylor Dunlap.
And we are with Justice Talks. I want to thank our director of the Community Impact Team here at Hope City, Shannon Moore, for giving us an opportunity to do this live with you guys today. If you are joining in, make sure you click share. Invite your friends to join us. We're going to have an awesome discussion today. So just FYI, there probably will be some spoilers in this discussion. So if you have not seen Black Panther and you don't want to have spoilers, then feel free to exit now.
Right, right.
But it's going to be a really, really great discussion. So as you guys know, Black Panther has came out, almost 2 weeks ago?
Yes.
So almost 2 weeks ago. And it has taken the world by storm.
Wow.
It is already, I believe, at like 700 million.
700 million.
Which is crazy. So quickly approaching $1 billion.
Yes.
Which is an amazing, amazing feat, and it has sparked all kinds of conversations. So that's really why we're coming on today to discuss some of the topics that have, or themes that were brought out in the film, as well as some of the conversations that have started as a result. And we really believe wholeheartedly that the church should be at the forefront of pretty much all of these discussions. And so our hope is to just discuss some of these topics and how they're impacting us, and I guess how we can further those discussions.
Right.
So.
Yes. So I went to see Black Panther. My husband took me for Valentine's Day. It was, you know how movies get hyped up, and then you're like, oh, I really hope this movie lives up to the hype, because there's been so much hype around it. And that first reaction of the movie is just, you have to see it again, because it's just almost overwhelming just how much impact emotionally it has on you. Action-packed, of course. It wasn't just something that was a historical thing, but Marvel really did an amazing job with the graphics.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was just, the costumes were amazing. The storyline was consistent and fluid, and it wasn't like, what in the world is going on? It was so fluid, and it was just a great movie to intake. Easy to intake, but tons of meat, per se. So I don't know, what were your first thoughts?
Well, I've seen it 3 times now, and I probably will see it a few more. And the reason being, for just what you said, there's so much in it. And I think just opening weekend was essentially a cultural event around the world, you know. And so the first time I went to go see it during opening weekend, it really was the hype of it all. You know what I mean? Like, we all got dressed up, we went out, we had a really great time. And so it was the hype of it all, and you knew it was a great movie. And I think even during my first time seeing it, so many things kind of stood out to me, but it was just like, because of the event of it all, you couldn't really process everything, you know what I mean? But there's so many points that really hit deeply. The second time I saw it, I think it spoke to me a lot more on a social level. And the third time I saw it, I think it spoke to me a lot more on a personal level.
Wow.
Yeah, so I definitely would encourage everyone, if you haven't seen it, to go see it, because it's absolutely worth watching. I know many people who have seen it multiple times. But what do you think, I guess for starting the discussion, opening weekend was a phenomenon. Like, it was crazy, it was fun, and not just for Black Americans, specifically for Black Americans or Black people in general, but for people, a lot of people from different backgrounds got excited. I know Lupita said that when they were doing the launch, I believe it was in either Korea or China, the locals there came in their local garb, like their traditional garb. So it was a celebration of not just African culture for many people, but an embracing of personal background and culture for a lot of people. So what are your thoughts on, I know probably a year leading up to the actual release of the film, people were sharing memes and preparing themselves for what they were going to do. And I think a lot of us thought it was funny, but we didn't actually think it was going to happen like that. You know, you seen them memes from Coming to America, and it was this is me and my crew going to see Black Panther. And we laugh and we joke and we're like, yeah, that's definitely going to be us. but you didn't really think it was gonna be like that.
Yeah.
But it actually was all that and more.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
What's really great to me is that it's just like any other movie. Star Wars, Avatar, Harry Potter. You know, we would, when those times would come, and I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan and that kind of thing. The dress up stuff is real, you know? So when it came time for this movie to come out, and to see everybody just step out for real, it was just like, wow, like this is really happening. And I thought it was really awesome because it kind of gave also light for Ankara fashion, for African traditional garb, for those things to be expressed and to be celebrated. And to do it, if you've never done it before, or if you've been afraid to wear a turban, or you've been afraid to wear cultural, traditional African wear, this was the time to do it. And I love that because not everyone is accepting of or at a space in their space where they're courageous enough to wear that beautiful print. And it was just beautiful for real, seeing different people of different cultures, even people that weren't African American, to come out and to embrace the culture and say, I'm going to go to this African shop and buy a dashiki or whatever is traditional for a man to wear to go to this movie, to honor this movie. I thought that was really powerful to be done. Me personally, I wore a turban and all black to represent, you know, not only Black History Month, but the Black activists, specifically Catherine Cleaver. And I was inspired by her, and I was just really excited.
Yeah, it was tremendously exciting. We went with a large group of people, and it was so fun. For me and my fiance, we ordered our outfits, I would say probably a month or two in advance when we bought all the tickets. Yeah. And that was so fun, finding that for her. And then me and a number of our friends went to an African store at a local mall here, and we had so much fun picking out outfits, putting them together, and not only that, but talking with the store owner, engaging in conversation, talking about why this day and this moment was so important, or the putting out of the film was so important. And I think, you know, because of the intense amount of celebration around, like there is no, I have a friend who has a saying, and it says, if you're going to do something, you might as well do the most, you know, do the most. And so I think that there was no lack of that. There was no lack of the most. There was no lack of people being extra. It was absolutely beautiful. But what was so interesting was to see a lot of backlash from white people, and especially even from other black people, about black people always doing the most, why we gotta be so extra, and you know, all of this stuff. And I thought what was so significant, it's just interesting that when, you know, Star Wars comes out and people get dressed up and they celebrate and they, you know, they do the absolute most, y'all. I'm talking about makeup, you know, all of that.
Yes.
But it's when black people specifically are celebrated or allow themselves to embrace, because people were unapologetically black, unapologetically ethnic, and embracing traditions and things that come from that community. And I just think it's interesting that when African Americans or black people choose to do that, that you have a backlash against that. And I saw Kev on stage put out a video that said, like, just let us have this moment. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, let them do them.
Yeah.
Let us be us. If we're going to do the most, let us do that, because this was a big, big turning point in history, with Ryan Coogler being an all-black cast, a black director. It was a very big move, and to be $60 million given for their budget. So this is the most expensive Marvel movie. They got the most money to make the Marvel movie, and he's made that over 3 times over, which I think says so much about Ryan Coogler and the producers and every one who was on the team, they were carrying the world, the nation, not just African Americans, but African culture on their back. The pressure. Watched the interview on Ryan Coogler, and they were like, how did you go in and perform? Was there a lot of pressure? And he said there was tons of pressure to make this movie. Yeah. But I will have to really focus that energy of putting on something great and focus it into my direction. And that's how pressure involved it was, to the point where he has no social media. He doesn't look at the news. He doesn't look at different interviews. He was solely focused on the project because of so much pressure to perform. And so with that being said, like, it obviously showed in the excellence of the movie and those things.
Yeah, I think what's beautiful too is Ryan Coogler said his intention was not to make a black film. Like, his goal was not to make a black movie. Right. His goal was to make a good film. And that's exactly what they did. It's so interesting. I saw the lady who plays Okoye. I think her name is, oh God, I'm gonna mess her name up. It starts with a D, but I can't remember it. But she said, because someone was asking her, like, about they or that they let you make this film and da-da-da-da. And she was saying that, there is no they. Let's just do what we do, and we do it well. Yes. So it's not necessary, though it is unapologetically, in a sense, a black film. It's not a black film. It's a great movie. That they did a tremendous job at making a phenomenal movie. Every actor was a phenomenal actor. Like, I don't think I saw any bad acting in the movie. Everything, like you said, the graphics, the effects, the fight scenes, all of it was absolutely phenomenal. Yes. And so I think what is interesting is most of the cast, even Ryan Coogler, they said that they were very aware of, in a sense, the importance of the film, but they didn't really grasp how important the film would be or what kind of impact it would be. They said that, they saw excitement all the way, like I said, a year in advance, but they didn't think that people would actually turn out the way they have turned out. So for you, as a African American or black woman, what would you say? Like, why to you is this movie important?
Oh, this is gonna get me emotional. And I think it was throughout the movie. I was sharing with my husband. It was during fight scenes where I was crying. I think he shared these sentiments in an interview as well about finding a hero that looked like him. Yeah. He said he loved Spider-Man, he loved Batman, he loved all of these different characters because children love superheroes. Absolutely. And he went into the comic store and he said, "Are there any superheroes that look like me?" Yeah. That's how he came across. That's how he came across Black Panther. And I think that in itself speaks to the journey. He's like, I didn't come across Black Panther when they offered it to me. Like, this is something he's carried his whole childhood and has shaped him as a black man. And so for the children to see themselves, for black young girls to see themselves just portrayed as not as objects or as women that are used or background people, but as warriors and graceful at the same time. The duality of the depiction of women is like, you don't need this long flowing silky hair to be beautiful, but actually I'm going to make her bald and I'm going to make her dark skinned and have on a gorgeous red beautiful flowing dress and at the same time strong, but when you see fighting strong and then when you see her with her husband, she's like, my love. You could see her being okay with being submissive or being in love and being loving. It is so powerful because to see that at 5 will change the trajectory of how you see how you can operate as a woman, as a black woman, especially with black women. our schema are that we're hard or we're bitter or we're too strong. And because we're too strong, we can't keep men and all of these different things. But this movie shows Black women as strong and graceful. Yeah. There's an and with that. So I can be strong and I can be graceful. Yeah. And my strength is actually beautiful. Yeah. And that brings us into the conversation about T'Challa and Okoye, or T'Challa and Nakia, which is, you know, his girlfriend or who he wants to be his queen. Yeah. He's not intimidated by their strength. Yeah. And he allows them to be strong. He allows them to be smart. With his sister Shuri, he allows her to create this technology for him as the Black Panther. And he's not intimidated by them. He's not intimidated by their sass. Yeah. He's not intimidated by them taking the lead. Yeah. And when he does step in to be leader, they submit in a way that is doable. So it's complementary to each other, and I love that they showed the complementary power in their relationships. Yeah,
I'm gonna come back into the women thing because I think we can go real deep on that because I have definitely some thoughts. But in terms of what you were saying about to see a superhero, Black women, and especially dark-skinned women, dark-skinned, natural hair women. So the importance of representation matters. And I saw this guy who I won't even name because it irked my life so bad. It was a white guy who was giving commentary about Black Panther. And he said that he saw a video with some young Black men in front of a poster for Black Panther, getting ready for it to come out. And one of the young Black men said, wow, this is so exciting. Is this how white people feel all the time? And the white guy's response was, no, what do you mean? Like, it's like we don't go to see a Superman movie and think, oh, this is so great, a white superhero. And I thought to myself, well, it's very easy for you to say that because all of them are white. So you don't consciously think about race when you are the predominant race. Like it's not something you think about. You don't have to long for representation because you have representation. You know what I mean? You've never had to think about how you don't have representation. So being a people who have not had representation and then to finally see something that looks like you is a beautiful thing. And I think what's so interesting, someone asked Ryan Coogler about that concept, and he said, I think, because they asked like how will white people feel, and he said, he's never felt like awkward that the people he's looked up to, for instance, all the superheroes for the most part, are white, but he's never had a problem looking up to them because they were white. Right. But it's interesting that when that dynamic starts to change, you start to ruffle feathers. And so I think, to your point, representation matters. It matters for a child to be able to see themselves in a positive light, and to go into the women piece is to see Black women portrayed in such a strong, powerful role, positive role. Whereas most movies where you see strong Black women or Black lead women characters, you have a tendency to see them as the embittered Black woman, or the woman who's been battered by society, you know what I'm saying, or who's fighting for, you tend to see her not as in a positive light. Even to see Black men portrayed in a positive light was a refreshing experience in a sense. And I think for a lot of people, it's more than just a movie because it gives you the freedom to conceptualize what a future could look like with strong, positive lead, like taking lead in your society. And I think even for the women who found like you didn't have to sacrifice your femininity at the altar of strength. You're able to be both strong and extremely feminine. You're able to be powerful, extremely beautiful. You're able to be both submissive and yet lead at the same time. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So I know you already shared some thoughts on that, but there was the scene where Okoye was fighting in that I think it was like South Korea, in the club or whatever it was. And, you know, they showed her walking into the club. She had the wig on her head. She was very uncomfortable with the wig. And she said, you know, this is ridiculous. And Nakia, thank you. Nakia made a comment. She was joking with her, like, it's fine, just whip your hair back and forth. And she said, like, this is a disgrace. And so there was, and even to see her when in the film, when she started to fight, she took her wig off and threw it, almost as a sense to say, like, you know, David, when he went into battle with Goliath and they tried to put him in somebody else's armor. That's correct, right, David?
Yeah.
Okay, make sure I get these Bible stories right. So, and he tried to go in someone else's armor, but he wasn't comfortable until he was in his own.
Right.
You know? And so to see Black women with agency, to be able to really own their own power, what do you think about that? How that came?
I loved that satire piece where she took the wig off and she was herself. Because it speaks volumes. Like, you can't win battles, you can't fight in your greatest strength if you are uncomfortable in who you are. If you're not who you are, then you can't reach your greatest potential. And that's what I loved about Okoye's, even her character. It was kind of like, I'm not doing this for people. Like, I am who I am. And this is who I am okay with being. And in that, she was so strong and she was so powerful. And even as her character kind of matured, because she was very patriotic. She was
extremely
Wakanda forever. Okay? To the point where you guys know when T'Challa, we thought he was gone.
Listen.
She was like, you know, I have to protect my country. I have to be about my country. It's all about her country. And to a point where it was like, but who are you? Yeah. What is it that you stand for? And I thought that was very powerful as well, is we can be at a space in our self where I think I know everything is solid about myself because I'm strong. But even there was a conflict there with her and Nakia. And Nakia's like, but who are you alleged to? Yeah. What does your heart say? Yeah. How do you protect Wakanda if you are for the things... Yeah. Whoever is in injustice in the system. And so just telling her, like, I need you to stand up for what is true, what is right. And to even see a character that looks confident and dressed and in skill set mature as well. I think that it was powerful to say that, yes, you might know your identity and you're comfortable in the way you look, and maybe even have a strong sense of strength and skill set of where you are in maturity, but there's still room for growth of understanding identity and how you stand.
Yeah. And I think what was so powerful was, and for those of you that are on here joining us, please click share, invite your friends to join us. We're having a powerful discussion, but you're going to hear us jump between different topics because really so many of these issues intersected so many times throughout the film. But I think what was so profound was when, tell me her name again, Nakia. I got her name so crazy. Nakia, Okoye and Nakia, when they were conflicting in that scene, and Okoye was saying, you know, I am loyal to that throne no matter who sits upon it. And I think there was both good and bad things that you can take out of that statement. Like, there are some very honorable principles in that, like in faithfulness and consistency, and even against her own feelings. She was heartbroken. She loves T'Challa. She loved Nakia. I'm going to get it right. Nakia. I'm going to write this down. Nakia.
Pray for him.
Pray for my pronunciations. So, as they were talking, she loved them, but she had made her vow and she had made her commitment. And I think there's some powerful principles. And so she was challenging Nakia in saying, you know, what are you faithful to? I'm faithful to this throne, but what are you faithful to? So what was so interesting was to watch two strong, powerful Black women own their decisions, but still be strong enough to challenge one another without losing the relationship. I thought it was so powerful because not only did she challenge Nakia, but Nakia challenged her to say, how can we be faithful to something that is wrong, that will essentially destroy everything we've ever known. So Nakia, it's interesting, the dynamic. So you have all these layers. You have an old broken system that people are, in one sense, in a way, rightfully so, faithful to. But how do we challenge that system without feeling like we have, lost loyalty? Do you get what I'm saying? And I think these dynamics are so powerful because we see them even in the church. We have the old system, or the religious system of doing things, and you have a people who are committed to the goal of the gospel, who don't necessarily feel that the old way of doing it, or even being loyal to that old way, is actually working. But to see that we can have these differing views without breaking relationship until we get to the desired outcome, which it kind of goes along with that scripture, is that we remain in the unity of the faith until we remain in the unity of the spirit until we come into the unity of the faith. Yeah. Meaning that we may not see eye to eye on all things, but the goal is that we have to remain in love and hope that eventually we get to the desired outcome.
Well, I think this is so powerful, and it kind of segues into, that's so powerful, segueing into same scene, but applying it to the church. Mm-hmm. You have millennials that are saying, how can we keep this all here in the church? We have all this anointing, all this power, all these things, and our people are suffering. There's people suffering out there. There's people that need what we have in here. They need what we have in here. And, you have a culture that's saying we have to keep it here. Yeah. We have to keep it inside. So it speaks to that isolation. Yes, that isolationism, which is, this is what we've known, and this is what has worked for all of these years and all of this time, and this is what is safe. Yeah. And this is what protects who we are and how we keep what we have. And you have Nakia, who her role was as a spy, and we could consider that to be a missionary, in a sense. Mm-hmm. And she's finding out that these people are suffering. And it's like, how can I come back to we have the glory? How can I come back and live a normal life knowing these people are suffering? Yeah. And I thought that was really powerful, like you said, about the challenge that there's people that are just these warriors in the faith that are like, I'm loyal to the throne. Mm-hmm. Like, if this is how it needs to be done, this is how it needs to be done. And I'm saying more of older people in the church, and then you have kind of like the millennial or the missionary hearted people that are saying, like, we need what's in here to go out there. Yeah. But I loved what you said about how they were able to agree to disagree, but still push both of each other into a maturation point. They challenged each other without hurting the relationship, and both matured. Yeah. And we saw that in the movie. Nakia eventually gives in to her love for T'Challa, and it doesn't show that she becomes queen, but who knows what the next we kind of assuming that she'll be queen. Hopefully. And with Koye, she follows her heart, and to the degree that she was willing to challenge her marriage, to challenge that down to the end, she's faithful until the very end, where her love for country actually does. She comes face to face where she has to make a choice, and she realizes that this guy is not qualified for the throne. And she says, you have so much hate in your heart that you are not qualified to be king. And I think what's so interesting is, at that point, and we'll probably have to come back to it, it's such a good point, but come back to that point where she challenges him, and he says to her, would you really kill me? And she says, for Wakanda, without question. And that was a powerful moment to say, because, like, what are you willing to sacrifice for, at the end of the day, the goal of the gospel? What are you willing to give up? But going back to your point, is I think what's so interesting in the church, we have to allow people to have a sense of agency, even in their roles within the kingdom. Like, if you are
the intercessory prayer. The Lord has called me to prayer in the ministry of the word, in the house of prayer, and that's what God gave to you. But God called me as an evangelist, so my passion is going out, reaching out souls. I have to be okay with your call and okay with my call. And I think if we stop trying to make everyone look like us, then we will be able to accomplish the goal much easier. And I think this even takes us to the concept of colonization. Like, Wakanda is such an interesting concept, even as it pertains to hair, to beauty standards, to roles, all of this stuff, because it essentially is a nation that has not been touched by colonization. Colonization is where you move into an area and you overtake an area, or you implement your ways and customs on a people. You take over and make everyone conform to your way of life. So in the African American community, beauty standards have been whitewashed, where kinks and curls were not actually accepted until, how old are you?
26.
26, I'm 29, so we're only 3 years apart. So when we were in high school, you were just starting to see people really start to embrace natural hair. And it wasn't even a thing until college. And in college is when you start to see like people, okay, they start going kind of hardcore. And now it's a very normal concept. It's almost becoming foreign to see people without natural hair.
Right.
And so what's so interesting is their perspective on things has not been colonized to the place where they would say everyone has to look like this one specific way of doing things. But they do, there are things that are just human nature. So there is in human nature, my way or the highway. You know what I mean? I'm comfortable with my way. So to see Wakanda, in a sense, as a kind of, in a way, as a kind of the kingdom, right? Who has all this hope, love, joy, peace. We have the answers for the world, but we isolate ourselves because we're afraid of what will happen if we let people in, or we start to, share our resources. And I think what's so interesting is that parallel with the church, where it's like there are so many people who are holding to, my for and no more, because they're afraid. You start to see young people do things in a way that is different than the way you did it, and it becomes scary because it's like, well, what if that's wrong, right? And I feel like we do so much out of fear that we don't allow ourselves to really operate in faith,
right.
And so how can I truly say that I love you and I want you to grow into all that, God has purpose for you, if I don't give you room to make a mistake? I watch you even with your daughter, and you allow her to fall, to bump her head, because she has to realize what what will happen if you do it the wrong way.
Right.
But I think allowing ourselves to really understand that, how can I say it? There are principles of the faith that do not change. The message doesn't change. The doctrine does not change. But just because the method may look different, it doesn't make it wrong.
Right.
Nakia's concern and heart for the people of the world and their suffering, though different to maybe the elders who wanted to hold on to their traditions and their way of doing things, was not necessarily wrong, as much as it's saying it's just a different way. And the fruit that could be reaped of it. I think it's important that we embrace the possibility of the unknown. Right. And I think in especially the modern church, we have fully done away with the concept of mystery. That there has to be a certain level of mystery. We don't know what we don't know. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't move. Yeah. Okay, so I would ask you about there's a character in the movie. Killmonger. And Killmonger is an interesting concept because he's a villain, right? But you understand his plight so much that it's like, it's really hard to look at you as a bad guy, because I just feel bad for you, because I get why you are the way you are. Especially I think people like ourselves who have hearts of counselors who are like, we understand pathologies and how people end up the way they are. Yes. And I think you watch his life, you see what happened to him, and his rage is understandable. And so let's talk about black rage. There's a quote, and it says, "To be black in America is to be in a state of rage all the time." Like to constantly be in a state of rage. And I think I understand that quote. Obviously, as a white person, I will never pretend to understand fully. I understand the concept of why that would be. So to you, Killmonger's role, his anger, his seeking of vengeance, even his goal, which essentially seemed to be the opposite of white supremacy, which would be black supremacy, where he said, we'll just start the world over and this time we'll be on top. What are your thoughts on Killmonger, his perspective, and Black Rage?
Well, I would definitely say, in the world of superheroes, Killmonger is a villain, but within a storyline, he is an antagonist. And I would say an antagonist to say that he is not the lead role. He is still a major role, but not necessarily per se a villain. And that speaks to, the understanding and the kind of counseling side in me as well. Killmonger is the motif of a majority of a lot of black male perspective as it pertains to just dealing with the fatherlessness, not by choice. Not by choice does he not have a father. Having to grow up in Oakland in California, which is known for violence and what people like to call black on black crime within the community. And so he's seeing his generation, he's seeing his communities being basically ruined, just crumbling, and there seems to be no resolute. And knowing, even losing his father, but learning of his heritage, of his Wakandan heritage, and knowing that there was more for him, but it was taken from him. And that really was such a deep weight. It's so much more taunting when it's kind of like when black men were in slavery and knowing they were made to be free. Knowing that they're human, but they're being sold like cattle, that feeling of I am more than this, but this is all that I have. This is all that I'm afforded to have, but I have so much more that should be allotted to me. And because that's all that's being given, and because there's no resolution, there's no truth being given, and I would say even from the communities, there's no one saying, like, you're right, this is wrong. It's, well, I'm going to do something about it. And even for his father was in that situation where he was sent as a spy to go and to see what was necessary for Wakanda, or if Wakanda wanted to branch out and do this resource kind of thing. And he, just like Nakia, was drawn in to what was going on and was like, we can use our resources to help these people. These people are sick. These people are, like dying, and all of this crime. And, at the time, T'Chaka was not willing to understand that. And within that, because there was a frustration of power, he gave in to the rage, which was giving one of the villains, I think his name was Rawl, or what was I can't remember, guys.
If y'all remember his name, tell us.
Giving him the vibranium and betraying Wakanda. Claw. Okay, there it is, Claw. But giving him vibranium because of the power struggle between him and his brother. And so even that being passed down when he became king, and he came into the ancestry, in the ancestry pool, and he went back to the apartment, and he's like sitting there with his father, and he was still a boy instead of a man, and his father never had a proper burial. It's kind of like those type of themes about Black America versus Wakanda.
Versus Africa.
African versus
the African diaspora. As opposed to people who are legitimate African heritage.
Right. Versus African American. It's kind of like, I will never know what
crisis.
it is. Yes.
Yeah.
To have a pure identity,
Yeah.
to have, be able to look up who my ancestors are and to go back to a specific country and have pride of being Wakandan or being those things, because I'm but half. You know, I don't know my other half. My mother, we were slaves, so I can't trace that back. And so there's this, I feel like there was a conflict within him that was like, I want to be embraced. I want what you have, but I'm going to be rejected. Because I'm not fully Wakandan. I'm not fully of that. I wasn't raised or born here. And that was kind of his father's explanation of why he couldn't take him back to Wakanda, was because they wouldn't receive him. And so you're dealing with all of this rejection, this theme of rejection. And when you have all of that rejection, it produces rage.
Well, you have fatherlessness, you have the environment you've grown up in, you have the brokenness, you have the identity issues, and then not only the identity issues, but the heritage of brokenness. Someone had put on here earlier, PTSD, and Joy DeGruy talks about post-traumatic slave syndrome, which is the same similar effects as PTSD. So all of this stuff passed down, and it does show up as rage, as what do I do with all of this feeling? I think what's interesting is, so obviously, Black Panther being an African story, it's a all black cast. It's hard to. I really give them props for being able to put these storylines in there, even though they may not have been able to present them in the fullness of what they really were, so that they could stick with the Black Panther storyline. But you look at them; they're trying to explain or put in the storyline of Black people, Americans, African Americans who were robbed of their heritage, though you don't see it coming from the white man necessarily because of King T'Chaka. But what's so interesting was King T'Chaka, when T'Challa was talking to him towards the end, after Nakia had told him, you have to choose what kind of king you want to be. And he was talking to his father, and he said, his father, King T'Chaka, said, in regards to Killmonger and that whole situation, it was the truth I chose to omit. And you think about our history as Americans, the history of African Americans and Africa really as a whole is the truth that we have chose to admit as a country. It's a truth that we have chose to whitewash. It is a truth that we have chosen to sanitize. And this rage, this I don't want to call it a beast, because I don't want that to be attributed to what I'm trying to say, but the rage or the outcome or the fruit of it now is a result of the truth that we have chose to admit. And it's almost like, no, this actually is what we have created. And because we have created this, we are responsible for now settling that, and I think it's almost a shame, you see how it ends. Again, we said this, you're going to get spoilers in this. So if you haven't seen the movie, you might want to move on. But click share before you do. So in the end, the quote that's been put out there a million times when Killmonger says, bury me with my ancestors in the ocean who jumped from the ships because they knew that death was better than bondage. And it's such a powerful and intense quote, but it comes from such a place of hurt. Because you got to think about this. Africa, when you hear the word Africa, just as an American, prior to seeing Black Panther, and if you're not necessarily considered woke, when you hear the word Africa, your first thoughts are probably poverty. Your first thoughts are probably like safaris. You know what I mean? You don't think of kings and queens and education and technology and all of this stuff. But Africa actually has a tremendously rich heritage of resources and education. Some of the first universities were in Egypt, and they were stolen by the Greeks, and then it became this. We were the ones who gave you all of this. So white people essentially became the founders of a lot of things that they weren't actually the founders of. And so there was this whole stolen identity, and then to have black people ripped from the continent of Africa, brought to America, even to this day, I mean, we've come a long way with DNA testing and all of this. I believe AfricanAncestry.com allows you to actually find out what cultures and tribes you're associated with, whereas Ancestry.com just tells you what parts of Africa you might come. Yeah. But so even though we've come a long way, you know, my fiance, I do Ancestry.com a lot for my family, and I've hit, you know, a block because of an adoption that was most likely not recorded, so I have no way to go further than that. But for my fiance, she's only been able to get just a little bit of her history, and now we're at a standstill because of slavery. And, you know, so black people are ripped of their identity, and so as a result of having no heritage, and not only no heritage, the only heritage that you actually know of is a heritage of trauma and abuse and violence, you know what I mean? And stereotypes. And so you look at Africa and you think, well, I'm not associated with that. Even when you start to find out the truth about how powerful Africa is, the resources, the history there's almost like a disconnect, I could imagine, where it's hard to, because I have people I know who are African American. When I say to them, you know, you're African, they're saying, I'm not African at all. Like, nothing about me is African. My parents are from, you know, such and such city. And it's like, but no, you are, somewhere in your heritage, there is African heritage, but there's such a disconnect between the root, you know? So what would you say is the importance of understanding and honoring the root? How does that help someone in moving forward?
Man, this get emotional, right? It is so hard. I remember at a point in time where I had to read slave narratives, and it was just really hard to actually read them because I'm like, this is my story. Yeah. These are my ancestors. Like, because they survived, I'm here. Yeah. Because, and you watch stuff like Amistad, which, to be quite honest, I've never seen because emotionally I can't. If you've ever been to the MLK Center in King Lincoln District, they actually have a passageway that pays homage to the Middle Passage and, you know, the slave ships and them being on the slaves. And they show a video clip from Amistad of when the ships weren't going fast enough, all of the slaves were in chains together, and they just start throwing slaves over the rails, and they were just falling into the ocean and drowning. And it was just like, it was just so heart-wrenching because it's like, oh my gosh, those are souls, those are people, those are bloodlines, those are like gone, no more. And to think that not only did my ancestors make it through scurvy, through disease, through starvation, through molestation and rape, through all of these different things, but even to get here to have to learn a language they don't even know, losing their language, losing who they are, and to not be able to give that to the next, to the next, to the next. Because even as a Black woman, you know, being in what were considered to be like puppy mills, making babies, being raped, making babies, and selling their babies. So you don't even know where your bloodline is going. You don't attach yourself to your children, or you kill your children because, you know, there was a scene in Underground where she killed her child, so they sold her, or they killed her because they said that she dealt with too much mental trauma and that would be passed down into their children, like breeding. Yeah. You know? So you read these narratives and you take on that weight and you're like, man, like, that's my people. You know, that is, I'm thankful for their strength, and I'm thankful for whoever my ancestors were, that they made it through such terrible, terrible trauma, but within that, they've lost who they were just to survive. And they had to become something different and to make something different. And so we see the resilience of a people. Once they were being able to be identified as people, they made what they wanted. And so if you haven't seen Underground, which used to be on WGN, it is an amazing show. Season 1 and season 2, I would go and look at it because it has a perfect depiction. But there was a depiction when they got to Canada, you know, they were able to change their name to whatever they wanted and start over. You know, they didn't have to take on their slave master's last name. They could choose a different last name and start over. And so that is the African American narrative, is at some point our great whoever, once they were free, decided to start over. And they couldn't go back and attain all of this heritage, this weighty heritage of whatever it was that we've come from. But it's so imperative to know. And what's really interesting, as you were saying about omitting this, trying to sanitize American history, that it's not given in high school. It's not given in elementary schools, unless you have teachers that come from passionate, like you need to know your history. If they're passionate about the community, they teach you. And it doesn't have to be in history. They'll teach you in language arts. All of my teachers, they would teach me who I was when I did it. And so my mom and dad, I did African dance, and we would go and we would understand Kwanzaa and those type of things. And it's heartbreaking sometimes because you don't feel connected to it, because you're like, oh, this is really interesting, this is cultural, and it's like, but this is a part of me. This is 50%.
But it's also the thought too of like, you know, I can imagine you as a young girl going to things like learning about Kwanzaa or African dance, and it being important to your family to teach that to you, but to you as someone growing up in this kind of America, to think, well, this is cool, but what is this going to do for my future? Because, you know, embracing my African heritage doesn't help me get ahead in America. You know what I'm saying? And I think for so long, so many people have rejected that because they know that it's either going to be dogged out, it's going to be judged, or it's not necessary in a sense. And I think what is so interesting is in this stripping of identity, and even for as African Americans, to be the trauma of identified as strong. Like you shouldn't. It's actually traumatizing to develop an identity based on the amount of pain you can go through. You know what I mean? Like for you to be identified as strong simply because the amount of pain you can endure is insane, as opposed to I am strong because I am. I'm powerful because I am, not because of the amount of abuse I'm able to take. You know what I'm saying? The reality is that African Americans' existence is a miracle. You know what I mean? Like you existing. I think our friend Chineze did her art show just the other day, yesterday, or Sunday. So Sunday night, called Black Girl Miracle. And it is an absolute miracle that you exist. It's an absolute miracle where we are today, even in history. But I think when you really start to learn, I think that's what one of the messages, or one of the things that Black Panther has done, has made people want to learn, to not only to say, you know, oh, I think I should look into that, but to say, wow, you know, there might actually be something great about my history worth looking into, you know, and this gets us to the topic of community. The Lord spoke to me a really powerful message about, you know, the fight scene. It's on Challenge Day. So T'Challa is getting ready to be coronated as king, and they're asking, you know, does anyone want to challenge for a path to the throne? And here comes M'Baku and the Jabari tribe. They come out, and M'Baku challenges him, and they're fighting. So you know that scene, right? Mm-hmm. And they're fighting, and M'Baku is whooping the crap out of T'Challa. Like, I mean, he's really beating this man. And T'Challa is seemingly losing. But I think if we back up, what was so powerful is when T'Challa gets to the fight, you hear the people saying, T'Challa, T'Challa, something. I don't know the song. But they're encouraging him. They're cheering for him, you know. His whole community is cheering for him. And then this guy comes and he challenges him and he's losing. And right when it seems like, he's about to be out for the count, like he's about to tap out. Right when it seems like that, there's a scene where he looks to his mother and his mother says, show him who you are. Show him who you are. And he leans up and he says, I am Prince T'Challa, son of King T'Chaka. And he gets this strength from somewhere and he beats the mess out of M'Baku, you know, and he wins. And the whole time his community is cheering him on. And what I think was so it's kind of like twofold, right? So there's the racial side, social side of things, which the church absolutely needs to be involved in and should take a leading role in. But there's also spiritual principles that you can pull from this, right? Mm-hmm. So in the spiritual side of things, and even pulling from the need for identity and the need for drawing strength from your community, it was so interesting to me. I think how the Lord ministered to me the other day was, you know, the enemy will come and he will fight you. He will challenge you. He will challenge your position. He will challenge your place. And his mother, in a sense, kind of represented the Holy Spirit to me. And she's like, no, show him who you are. Remind the devil who you are. And he declared, no, I am Prince T'Challa. And so it's almost like the Lord was saying to me, you need to say who you are. And not only who you are, but whose you are. I'm a son of Jesus Christ, the Lord Jesus Christ. You know, and from that, he pulled strength to overcome. But not only was it the embracing of my identity, the embracing of whose I am, my heritage, my lineage, but the embracing of the cheering on of my community, that my community is for me. You know what I mean? That there are a cloud of witnesses that are all around you, cheering you on, that the fight really is fixed. So it may seem like you're losing, but if you could just remember who you are, if you could just remember whose you are, and if you can remember that you're not alone in the fight. You know what I mean? Because the fight was ordained. It's a set fight. You know what I mean? But it's appointed for you to win this, you know?
Yes.
So what are your thoughts on the importance of community and identity, how that all intertwines?
That part was so powerful. That was one of the parts I was crying on, y'all, during the fight scene, especially when she said, show him who you are. And
he didn't say, a lot of people are quoting it and saying that she said, tell him who you are. But that's not what she said. She said, show him. And so he declared it, and then he showed him. So I just want to say that.
Yeah. And I was going to say that stood out to me as well, is when she's not, tell him, but show him who you are. Show him that you were made to be king. You were made for this. You have been prepped and primed. You were born into this battle, and up into this appointed time, you were made to be victorious. And what I even love about that scene was that he got beat up. You know, like, you're just expecting him to, like, really kill or whatever, and he ends up being very weak. But the other part that I thought was even more powerful was when they stripped him of the vibranium, when they stripped him of the heart-shaped herb, and he was weak. He was weak in his flesh. But yet, when he still remembered who he was, he gained the strength that was necessary to be victorious. And
side note, we don't mean to preach. Some of your battles, the strength is taken from you before the ordained battle can start. The Lord purposes some battles for you to be at your weakest moment before the battle can even begin.
Yeah, and I was gonna say that's exactly where I was going. Was God sometimes strips us of everything just to show us at the core who you are. Like, you're anchored. I got you. Like, remember who you are. Remember that I'm with you, that I've ordained this for you. So it doesn't matter if you have all of the power, you're at the highest height of who you are. I have you. Remember in whom you are, and show the enemy who you are. And that was so just powerful to me. But even to move forward into when he battled Killmonger, the reason why he lost was because he was lost within himself. T'Challa lost that battle because he was flustered. He didn't know what he wanted to do. He didn't know if he wanted Wakanda exposed and not to be isolated, or he was so torn within himself. Yeah. He was warring within himself. He was warring within why his father chose to admit a truth. Yeah. He was warring within himself about who Killmonger was and why and how it happened. And so he was so flustered he couldn't remember who he was. And in that, that was why he was defeated in that moment.
I can imagine it's the same feeling that Eve felt in the garden, where because she listened to the lie, or because she listened to the confusion, and it allowed her identity to shake, that she ended up going into a direction she shouldn't have gone. You know, and I think going back to the fight scene with M'Baku, you know, he's fighting him, and M'Baku says, "Where's your God now?" You know, and I think it's so interesting because, you know, the Jabari tribe worshipped a different God. They worshipped the gorilla God as opposed to the Panther goddess. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's even in that, and sometimes in fighting, and so M'Baku is talking to T'Challa's community, right? So his accusations are not only to T'Challa, but also to his community. And he's saying, where's your God now? You know, you allow your people to be run by all this stuff. But even in the face of that, the support from the community say, nah, bruh. Like, we know who he is. You know what I mean? And though there may be people in your community who you may lose some. You know, you may lose some supporters. You may have people that are against you in the community, but you have more people that are for you than against you. And I think it's a lie from the devil to make us isolate, to make us pull away from community, to make us think that no one's there for us, no one cares for us, when the reality is that if that even exists, it's probably a very small percentage as opposed to those who are for you. Mm-hmm. And so even, you know, you took it to the fight scene with Killmonger.
There was no community.
No, the community wasn't there.
He had no community that was there. Yeah. And that was what I was going to go into about the contrast between the two, was that his community, you know, the argument was it takes days to prepare for this, you know, and he's like, no, I need to fight him now. And he's like, we can do it now. Even with him having all of what was going on in his mind, he had no community to be like, T'Challa, T'Challa. Mm-hmm. Like, this is who you are. And so he's in the moment looking at Killmonger, even in that, the confusion. And I thought that was really powerful as well. He could definitely see him as enemy, but in his heart, he was like, this is my cousin. Mm-hmm. It's my fault. Mm-hmm. It's our fault that he's even angry towards Wakanda. It's our fault. This is my burden. This is my weight. And to me, that spoke to, you know, not taking on the burdens of your fathers, or not taking on what was not your responsibility, but having the focal point of like what needs to be done now. So even as it pertains to the church, is we've made mistakes in the past, and they're very evident. They are very evident, regardless if the church wants to take ownership of that or not. If we are aware, a lot of millennials are aware and they're being exposed. Yeah. It's not my responsibility to take ownership of what has happened, but to correct it and to go forward and say, for the sake of Wakanda, I have to be firm in who I am. And right now, you are an outsider coming in to disturb or disrupt what is already, you know, known. Yeah. And I think within that, there was a struggle of mercy, of is he really a villain, or is he my brother? Is he my cousin? It's not his fault he's this way, you know? And within that, with those ponderings within his heart going on, it led to his demise. So I thought that was a really powerful scene.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think I want to wrap up on this thought, because we've been on here for a good little time. If you haven't done so already, please click share, invite your friends. We appreciate those of you that are commenting. We see your comments, and we definitely appreciate you. Click share. We're going to wrap up in just a minute, but I want to dive back into, and we'll wrap up on this, the role of women as it pertains to the church, right? So one thing that I've always found interesting is Christian women. So you have obviously the issues of women, period, that fight. You have the fight of being a black woman. But then you have an even heavier fight to say, well, I'm a Christian black woman, because you have the things that are imposed, or the impositions of religious tradition put upon you as a woman. And I think to see, I know we kind of hit on it in the beginning, but to see the roles of men and women working, complementing one another, not intimidating one another, and to really come alongside, side by side, that your strength does not intimidate me. It doesn't even speak. There's really not even a space for comparison. It is that you are you, I am me. You know what I mean? And I need you to be at your absolute best so that I can be at my absolute best, and vice versa. But I would say even, that women have been suppressed historically within the church. And there's always this thought, it's almost like, from what I've seen, my personal experience with it, right? So I'm not teaching doctrine here. I'm just sharing my personal understanding. What I've seen so many women have to Photoshop themselves or detract from themselves for the sake of catering to the shortcoming or the issue of a man, right? So for instance, I need you to wear like 6 sheets over your body, because if you have your shoulder out, the man might be aroused. And so because you are a sexual object, and because we don't deal with sex correctly in the church, I need you to cover up, because you are a stumbling block for the man. But the man is never charged with responsibility for his role in the matter. So I would say, how do we, as Christians, empower women to walk in their strength in a biblical way, complementing as men and women? Do you know what I'm saying? What would you say to the principles of womanhood and femininity that are pulled from the movie, speaking to Christian women, not just black women, but to Christian women? What would you say?
Well, one thing is for sure is that one, there was no hypersexualization of
Absolutely.
women in the film at all. And
there was clear desire that was expressed, not sexually.
Clear desire, but no objectifying of women within the movie. And I thought that was very powerful. It was refreshing, because black women are always hypersexualized. Well, I can't say always. That would be a lie. Majority of the time, when black women are objectified, women in general are objectified through a male perspective lens in film. And so for it not to be hypersexualized, for that role not to be hypersexualized, it's easy to apply to the church. Because now we're dealing with like pure intent, pure thoughts. Wakanda is like an Eden. It's like a heaven, situation. So we're dealing with purity. And so alongside of that, I think it's important to know who you are. They knew who they were. Just like when he made the comment or the quote about her being stubborn. And he was like, you would be a good queen if you weren't so stubborn. And she was like, I would be a great queen because I'm stubborn. She accepted that she was stubborn, but she also edified and affirmed herself in that and said, and that's why I would be a great queen. And he laughed at that, but it wasn't like he scolded her for that that comment, but he actually pondered about it and thought about it, and to say, hey, this is a great characteristic of her.
Because her stubbornness didn't intimidate him.
No, right.
The fact that she has her own opinion didn't intimidate him. It didn't subtract from his kingship.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And her differing of opinion didn't subtract from his power, But I think we have so many misconceptions, and it really is based, again, in identity, especially in the church, we have a tendency to build our identities off of our history of bondage, right? Or we're just super aware of so many of our shortcomings. We're not aware of strengths. So then it's like, okay, for instance, for the men who deal with sexual struggles, you focus on that so much that you don't allow yourself to be, like for me, coming out of the background that I come out of, having to relearn that a body is a body. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't need to be sexualized. So when I look at a body, I don't have to, I can control my mind and retrain my mind to not jump immediately sexual. And it's interesting, even in the movie, to see Killmonger's interaction with his girlfriend in America, as opposed to the men's interaction with women in Wakanda, because she's used. She was used as a way to get what he wanted, and when as soon as he got what he wanted, she was gone. He killed her. I mean, he shot that girl in her head, and the scene right after they robbed the place where he was. I mean, they were tonguing down it was really a completely unnecessary scene for real.
But she was hypersexualized. And that comes back to,
our view of
not to
women.
even veer off, but to come back about Black women.
Yeah.
I have a friend who made a statement about, they made a statement about Black women when he shot her in the head and left her there. That was she was the only Black woman in the whole entire movie. And so there's been, a lot of talk about Black women not having voice, Black women being the most unrepresented woman, her story not being told. Her voice
we never
not
even
being
knew her
raised.
name.
We didn't know her name. She didn't have a name. She was nameless. She was hypersexualized. She was shot in the head, and there was no more.
So as a result of the rage that comes from the history of Black men in our country, the people who suffer the most for that
is
are
American Black women. Yes.
And I think, again, now mind you, I think people are put a lot of pressure on this movie as if it's supposed to deal with all this stuff.
Yeah.
The movie was supposed to tell the story of Black Panther, which it has done and is doing. But I think it was so wise of them to find these ways of putting these storylines in there to spark conversation. I don't know if that was the intention, but it definitely sparked conversation. It was significant. It's significant that she had no name. It's significant that she was killed. It's significant that she played no role even in the rediscovery of history, because she was not Wakandian and she represented the African diaspora who were not a part of Africa, if you will.
Right. But to bring it back to what you were asking about the leadership thing, I also thought it was very profound that Nakia was willing to come back from her missions or those things that she was on to honor T'Challa in his coronation. Absolutely. And so, yes, we can be busy within the kingdom and be doing what we're doing and what we're called to do and what God has called us to do. But to come back and to honor when men are being established in their spaces. And she knew it was important to him for her to be there and to honor and to be there. And I thought that was really profound as well. As she could have told him, like, I'm not coming back. There's too much work that has to be done and all of these different things. But she chose to come back and to honor his coronation. And I think from a church point of view, sometimes as women, because we want to prove ourselves so much that we're called by God, we're called to do this and we're called to do that, that we don't take the time to just allow men to be honored, that God calls men, and it's okay to be excited and to be proud that God does call men and he does coronate men or appoint and anoint men to go forward and to do things and to establish and to have apostolic calling. And it's okay to be celebratory of that. We shouldn't have this feeling like, well, men always get celebrated. We don't need to be there. I need to be doing whatever it is that I need to do. But instead have that heart to say, let me stop what I'm doing and to celebrate this man.
And I think it's important to know for the men that it's okay for women to be strong and celebrated and supported. And I would say too, for those of you who have a different view, maybe you're a woman who feel called to the home, you feel called to serve your husband, only you feel called to not take work outside of the home, et cetera, that is okay too.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I think, again, you should have a sense of agency in that. I think where we get into error is when we take on the mindset of the colonizer that says it has to look this one way. And so, whether you're called to the home, whether you're called to, whatever, or you're called to corporate America, or whatever you're called to do it to the best of your ability and be excellent in that. And I think, I know we said the last subject, but we're really gonna wrap up with this subject is, again, if you have not gone to see Black Panther, you should definitely go see it. I think one of the things that's so interesting you always get with the Saints is you're going to have those group of people who are unable to perceive the importance of the film. You have people who are going to be unable to hear the messages of the film because it conflicts with their religious or even super spiritual views. So for the record, this is not a Christian movie. We are not saying that you should go watch Black Panther to gain doctrinal insight. We are not saying that you should go see Black Panther as opposed to reading your Bible. The Bible is the source, right?
Yes.
That is where we gain our truth, our doctrine. All of that is in the Word of God. What we are saying is that Black Panther is a powerful movie. It is an important movie in history. It's stirring. It's doing, sparking a lot of conversations. It's important for women. It's important for the Black community. It's important for the human community as a whole. But it is not a Christian movie. Christianity was not written into the script. The writer did not write in that the actors were going to get saved or that the characters were going to get saved. So it's based in Africa, it's based in tribal history. So if when you see things like praise the ancestors or the Panther goddess or some forms of what we would deem as witchcraft, you should not be shocked. And if seeing those things causes you to be unable to deem it valuable or causes you to be unable to actually listen and to see, then you are a part of the problem. And the reason I say that is because the moment something is different, we have a tendency to pull away. We have a tendency to put it in a box. And there's a scripture that says, judge nothing before it's time. And I think it's imperative that you allow yourself to be able to listen, even though something may differ from what you think it should be. The reason is this. Paul went into a place where they worshiped many gods. There was altars built to all kinds of gods. Paul did not say, oh my God, they're worshiping other gods. This is terrible. I'm out. And he didn't just stand there and say, you're sinners. You worship so many different gods. You're terrible. You're going to hell because you don't serve the one true God, Jesus. He took the time to traverse through that city. He walked through, he beheld what they were doing. He saw the different altars. He considered their beliefs, and he came upon an altar to the unknown God. He would have never stumbled across that altar if he allowed their difference to turn him off from jump. So because he allowed them to be other, he didn't expect them to be what he was. It allowed him to stumble upon the altar to the unknown God, and he was able to preach to them Jesus by saying, you worship an unknown God, and I know who he is. Let me tell you all about him. And so I think it is imperative when you approach any situation to be mature enough to, in all you're getting, get an understanding before you judge a thing.
I agree.
Yeah. Closing thoughts?
Yeah, my closing thoughts would be just one of the points I thought was really profound, and we're gonna would be with the protagonist, T'Challa, King T'Challa. He was kind of going back and forth with Killmonger about who it's all for. Yeah. And he said, it's not that we are made to be a separate tribe. I'm called to bring people together to become one tribe. And I thought that was just so powerful spiritually. Just as a Black woman who is Christian, I can be fully Black and fully full of Christ. And because my desire is not that black supremacy, my desire is not that Black people would be held greater than, but my desire is that our truth can be accepted and we
celebrated.
can celebrate it, and that we can truly become one.
Yeah.
We can become one tribe, which is what God says, that all tribe and tongue, and using every means that there are separate nations, there are separate tribes, there are separate all of these different things.
Yeah, different doesn't mean bad.
Different doesn't mean bad. You know, colonization told us that, but the Lord is pleased and he desires for every nation, tribe, and tongue to come in. And I loved that T'Challa was like, you know, that's where we're different. Yeah. Is Wakanda's resources will be used to bring all together into one tribe, for the whole world to become one tribe. Yeah. And so, you know, if you're having these conversations with people who have, you know, what we'll say in culture, or the social climate, Black pride, and they have to, you know, sever themselves in half and be Black and be Christian and those type of things. You can be both Black and Christian. Yeah. The difference between you and someone with solely Black pride is that your desire is not to conquer another culture, but it's to say, accept our truth.
There's not a sense of supremacy.
Yes, there's not a sense of supremacy. Yeah. So it's accept our truth, accept what has happened in my history and what my ancestors have gone through and where I come from, and celebrate that. Yeah. And I'll celebrate you.
Yeah, and for her to say, I'm Black and I'm proud, doesn't make me feel inferior. Right. If someone else celebrating who they are and what they are makes you feel insecure, that speaks of your insecurity, and your insecurity is no indication of mine. And so we cannot allow ourselves to continue to embrace or own the insecurities of another. That is your issue, and you should settle that issue. For instance, God is not colorblind. When we say we are all one in Christ, we are neither Greek nor Jew, all of this stuff, that wasn't told to us so that we can say that because I'm Christian, therefore I am not this. That was said because Jews were trying to make Greeks become Jews. They were trying to make Greeks live by Jewish rule and Jewish law. And he was saying, listen, it's all about Christ. In Christ, we can embrace the differences of one another. In one faith, we believe in the Lord. And so I am proud to be white. I'm white and I'm proud. And, people say to me, it's a joke. We joke around a lot. People say, Carl, you ain't white. You Black. And I say, no, I'm definitely white. I am definitely white. When I look in the mirror, I see white skin. I don't have as much melanin as she does. She doesn't have as much melanin as her daughter does. So, but I don't feel bad about that. I love her melanin. I love my skin. God made me white. God made her this skin color, and it's not meant to be not seen. When you say, I don't see color, what you are actually saying, dear white friend who says that, what you are actually saying is, when I see you, I don't see you different than me because I'm the standard. And so you erase someone's difference because you're uncomfortable with it. But true healthy community is I embrace you with all of your differences, and your differences don't intimidate me. I actually think they're worth celebrating. Yes. I think it's beautiful that you're Black, and I think it's beautiful that I'm white, and I think it's beautiful that we all are one people, one human nation. And I think, I'm sorry, I'm just going to go back to it, but again, because they were telling the story of Black Panther, it's interesting that they had the brother of the king was, in a sense, the initiator of what led to Killmonger's rage and anger and his brokenness, when really all of humanity comes out of Africa, which is the birthplace of all. The historians will tell you it is the cradle of humanity. So in a way, we all come out of Africa. We are brothers and sisters. We are one human people. The color or the pigmentation of our, what is this, epidermis or dermis? I don't know what it's called. Our skin. It's just a thin layer. Right? And it should not cause such crazy divisions, but it is worth celebrating. Yes. It's worth celebrating. And so we'll wrap up on saying that we really, there's honestly hours and hours, probably days and days worth of discussion, things you could talk about. But our goal is really just to inspire you to think critically. We want you to think critically about your life, your background, your heritage. You don't have to sacrifice your heritage at the altar of Christianity. You can be Black and saved. Your blackness is surrendered to the Lord, but it's not done away with. When you look in the mirror, you're still going to be black. When I look in the mirror, I'm still going to be white. So all of this to say, God is up to some amazing things. It's imperative that we as Christians educate ourselves, that we learn, and that we become well-versed in having these discussions, and that we are allowed to have discussions even where there may be difference, where we don't allow the difference to cause us to disassociate. And so, again, at the end of the day, it's all about love. We love you guys. Thank you so much for watching.
Yes. Go see it again.
Yes, go see Black Panther. Go back and rewatch this video if you came in late. It's amazing. It's only a little over an hour long. Click share. Share it with somebody.
Yes, share.
And thank you again to Shannon, the director of our community impact team. You're awesome, girl. And shout out to our pastor, Pastor Brian Williams, who leads Hope City House of Prayer. We love you so much. Bye.